Hi, this is Ron from POCculture.com. I'm here with Marcus Best, Senior Vice President of Allied Multicultural, a branch of Allied Global Marketing, one of the top marketing and PR agencies in the industry. Marcus, thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you for speaking with me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Great. I'm excited to share with you. I love the work that you and Allied Multicultural are doing. But before we get into the meat of that, I know you have an extensive background in music, having worked at Warner Brothers and Interscope. So easy question, kind of easy. If you were stuck on a deserted island and you could only take one artist's catalog with you to listen to for the rest of your life, who's that artist?
Oh, that's a great question. Hold on. I have to think about it. You know what? I'm going to say Jon B. And the reason why I say Jon B is because Jon B is the first person who gave me an opportunity in LA when I moved to LA. I got hired by Babyface and Tracy Edmonds to work for Edmonds Entertainment. And then I think a week into me working with them, they told me I was going to be the personal assistant for Jon B. And I was like, you are kidding me. And that's before I knew what a personal assistant entailed. So that includes walking the dog, doing laundry. It's a host of different things in addition to just like managing their day-to-day. But I would say Jon B, he has an amazing catalog of music. He is a notable producer who has worked with the likes of Drake and Babyface. So I would definitely say Jon B.
That's a great answer. Babyface would have been a great answer too, but
yes.
Obviously that's an excellent answer. What a great answer that impacts you personally, and a perfect segue. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got started with that, and so what was it like just being, this young professional who is working with this legend? What was the personal dynamic and even hopefully some mentorship like with Jon B?
Oh, definitely. So I basically got my start. I was interning at BET in Washington, D.C., because I'm originally from the DMV area. And Tracy Edmonds came by, because I think at the time she was promoting soul food. And so she was at BET, and I was telling her team that I was interested in moving and transitioning to the music space. And she connected me with her VP of marketing and said, basically, after you graduate, if you're serious about pursuing music, send me your resume. And I did. And so right after I graduated from college, I moved to LA because they gave me an opportunity to work with Edmonds Entertainment in their marketing department as a marketing assistant. And like I mentioned, a week in, they said, okay, now you're going to be Jon B's assistant. So it was a beautiful experience. I did it for close to 3 years. Jon B was an amazing mentor. He basically showed me the value of hard work and just going above and beyond what's necessary to achieve greatness. And so I think like me actually having to work out of his house, understanding who he is as a person, understanding what it takes to put in time and energy in your craft so that you can be great. I learned a lot of that from him. So, kudos to him for instilling in me the work ethic and the hustle that's necessary to, exist and strive in LA, because it's hard to live in LA and pursue entertainment. So he was able to kind of teach me a number of things, but I think hustle and just drive and passionate about what you intend to do, whether it be entertainment or if it's like, you being a teacher, just being driven and passionate about what you do. So he taught me that. So key lessons that I learned from him.
That's an amazing story. Now, I lived in Washington, D.C. for a few years myself, so I'm familiar with the DMV area, grew up in the LA area. I think an outsider might think, well, both areas are very diverse, so it might not be that big of a transition, but it actually is very different, right, from coast to coast. What was it like for you transitioning, again, as a young professional coming to LA, and what was a little bit of the culture shock you experienced?
Oh, it was quite different. I think the East Coast versus the West Coast, the people are completely different. Even though I was fortunate to grow up in a diverse community, I think moving to LA and not having any family or friends based here made it kind of challenging when I first moved out here. So I would say for the first year and a half, I was going back to DC every 2 months because I missed my family, I missed my friends, my connection, my tribe. But I quickly learned that in order for me to be successful and build my own community in LA, I needed to stop going back to the DMV and being amongst my family and friends. And I had to just like put some efforts and stake in the ground as far as planting my seed in LA and growing my tribe here. So once that happened, I was able to kind of build a tribe of people who, you know, you trust and who will always have your back and support you in all of your endeavors, whether it's your career or just stuff that you're passionate about outside of your career. So I would say the people was different, but at the end of the day, I grew to find my tribe. A lot of them are from the East Coast. A lot of them some are from LA. They're LA natives, but I'm in a good place now. But my first 2-3 years, it was challenging.
Yeah, and it's so crucial. You talk about building, finding and building your tribe. I think that's crucial in everything, but that's uniquely challenging in LA, in my opinion. It's very spread out. You have a lot of transplants, a lot of people coming and going for a very specific purpose. So I imagine that was pretty challenging.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I was trying to do is I was trying to find friends that were in the entertainment space. And I quickly learned that was not the best for me. And I'm not saying that I did not have friends, close friends that were in entertainment, but I had to branch out to find people who were not in entertainment as well to kind of build out my tribe.
That's really great advice and perspective, to just not be in a bubble. I think is really important. Let's talk about Ally Multicultural. You know, formerly, as I understand it, under the Ally Global Marketing umbrella, there were several multicultural brands: Allied Moxie, Allied ASEAN, Contigo, Pride, and recently that was all brought under one umbrella, under your charge. So, what prompted that change?
I think there's power in numbers, and at the end of the day, I think we collectively have universal stories, whether it be family, whether it be music, whether it be food. And so when we are putting together strategies for different clients, I think taking a more integrated approach is most beneficial, even though we can have special nuances of a campaign that speak to the authenticity and the customs and the cultures of each of our divisions. But at the same time, I think holistically from a campaign perspective, we need to be taking a more integrated approach and saying, this is what's going to move the needle for multicultural in the publicity standpoint, whether it be marketing and field grassroots, whether it be digital and social. So I think for us, strategic, it just made more sense than just keeping it siloed and separated. And so once we made that decision, we saw the impact that it was making on various campaigns. Clients were like, it's just a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer because at the end of the day, I think we all have a connection. We all have communities that we're trying to reach in a way that's authentic, but at the same time, we want to leverage our power. We want to leverage our voice, and there's power in numbers.
Hey man, Marcus, you're talking my language. You know, that's my passion too. A lot of people, when I started my site, were like, why don't you just do an Asian-focused site and report on Asian-focused issues? And I agree with you that we're stronger together. And I think that's shown over the last few years. So conceptually, I love the structure of it. And when I saw that announcement for Ally Multicultural, it really gave me chills, because I think that's the approach going forward that everybody should adopt. I think it's overly restrictive when a studio says, well, here's the Asian film and here's the Black film, and go out and get those communities only. But from your perspective, the bird's eye view, you're at the top. So practically, what are some of the challenges that you faced in trying to really have a multicultural approach with these clients?
If you want me to be honest, I think it's just about educating certain clients about our communities and the approach, because sometimes they look at us as a monolithic audience. And just, I think within each division, within each community, we're vast. And so it's like sometimes media has portrayed us in a certain stereotype. So it's just about breaking those stereotypes that certain clients might have and telling them we are much more than what you want us to kind of focus on. And how about we look at it from another angle or another way of positioning this campaign that will broaden the audience, but still reach the multicultural audience. So I think educating our clients is one of the #1 challenges that we face on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I hear that regularly from various diverse professionals and leaders in the community when it comes to dealing with, historically older, white male-centered executives having a hard time really grasp. Like they know they want to leverage diverse communities, but they don't really know how. Without naming any names and getting anybody in trouble, is there anecdotally an example that you can draw from of having to really change the focus and educate your client that ended up being successful?
From a broad level or top line level, I think early on when I started at the agency and we were working on a couple of campaigns, and one of the tactics that I won't say the client's name that they wanted to do was to reach the African American audience. I'll just use them as an example, was go to barbershops and beauty salons. And I was like, yes, we can do that, but we can do other things. How about us going to HBCUs or colleges? How about us going to different groups and organizations that can also reach the audience? What about tapping into fraternities and sororities? So we were kind of able to educate them on, yes, we can do that, but we can do much more as well to broaden the audience that you guys want to reach for this campaign.
I love that. And that just speaks to the authenticity of your knowledge and perspective and background that, they probably saw a movie. They probably saw Barbershop, let's be honest. And they were like, hey, that's how we're going to market it. We want to get into the barbershop because the movie told me that's where we need to reach those audiences.
Right.
So I love to hear that. If you could walk us through a little bit of what the process is like when let's say a studio wants to partner with you. Let's say they have an upcoming film. Is it usually they come to you and say, hey, here's a film that we want to tap into a certain audience, or do you make a pitch? How does that process work from the beginning?
I think it's twofold. A lot of times, since we have an existing relationship with a lot of studios and streaming platforms and networks, they'll come to us and say, we have a new project, whether it be Power or P-Valley, and we want you guys to put together a top line strategy so that we can kind of review to kind of reach the multicultural audience. And then there's times when we have to say, okay, we know a project is coming down the pipeline that we're interested in. We have to then go to the studio and say, you know what, we would love to be considered for this project. Is it an opportunity for us to put together a strategy or proposal for your review for consideration for us being brought on to work on that project? So it's twofold. A lot of times, since we've been in the business for so long, they'll just come to us and say, can you put together a top line strategy because we want to bring you on board? And then there's other times where we have to put our hat in the running for consideration for a specific title or film.
That's great. And do they ever bring you on early enough in the process to really formulate not just obviously the marketing and the PR on the back end, but the overall message and tone of the films or shows?
Yeah, certain clients will bring us on earlier than typically we come on around 3 months. But certain clients will bring us on maybe earlier than that, just to kind of get our eyes and our, consultation on the messaging, the branding, how they want to position the film, because they understand that sometimes there's sensitivities around a specific campaign that their team might have a blind spot to, that we have to kind of help inform the messaging and how they should roll out the campaign so it's not going to be damaging to any particular audience. So we sometimes work well in advance, I would say 6 months in advance on certain projects that might have, some sensitivities around the themes and the subject matter.
And I think that's great because I'm hearing a little bit, just a tiny bit more of that kind of thing happening. I wish it would happen more because in many ways, you're the experts culturally in terms of reaching that audience. It doesn't make a lot of sense to just throw something at you, here's the film or here's the show, and has all kinds of problematic elements. And then they say, go market this to your audience. And you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? I wish they would bring you all in earlier in the process so that even on the creative side a little bit, they could have a more holistic view of how to reach the communities they desperately want to tap.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we've learned as a team, to find our voice and push back and Typically when they bring us on and they'll allow us to kind of screen in advance, we'll screen and then we'll be like, look, we just need to be fully honest and transparent. These are some red flags for you guys. So we need to figure out a solution and get in front of how are we going to position this in a way that's not going to be problematic when we start pushing out the content. And so we've done that on a number of projects because ultimately we know our audience. And one of the things that as an agency and as a division, we want to be protective of our audience. And we know that certain press outlets are going to eat certain things alive if it comes out and just the messaging is insensitive, or we're not looking at it from the big picture and understanding the nuances that our audience has, and that it could, you know, the tone, the imaging, and all of that is going to be an issue. We're going to flag that and say no, because I think that's our duty as an agency working with specific clients to say, you brought us on, we're here to help. We have some concerns, and this is what it is. How can we get in front of this?
Right, absolutely. And clearly, a lot of studios need that. I'd love to, speaking of problematic historically, let's talk a little bit about the AAPI focused work that we've seen. I mean, I think in recent years, we've seen a lot of positive evolution in terms of how Asians are portrayed in media, and studios that want to tap the Asian audience. How have you seen that, both from the studio side and just on your end, the audience side, the Asian community evolve in terms of Asian projects and Asian outreach?
Oh, I think it's evolved immensely. I think like when I started in 2017 at the agency to where it is now, I think it's grown, and I understand. I think a lot of clients understand that. I think they had one example of what they thought AAPI represented. And so I think now they're understanding there's such a vast audience within AAPI that they need to take in consideration when they're, you know, casting, when they're creating storylines, when they're thinking of like the producers and the writers behind the scenes. I think they understand that you just can't bring in a certain audience within AAPI. You need to look at it from a broader perspective. And I think our clients in particular understand that. And sometimes we'll just also advocate like, one of the things that we do when we're putting together a campaign is, yes, we want the talent in front of the screen, but we also want the talent behind the screen. We want to know who the writers are. We want to know who the producers are, because I think that brings a level of authenticity that our audience wants to be aware of. We want to know who the director of this project is. We want to know who the writers are, because I think that lends credibility and lends interest and excitement for people to go support your project.
100%. And I always say diversity in front of the camera is important, but just as important, if not even more so, like you said, is behind the camera. And nowadays, audiences are a lot more sophisticated. You know, maybe when you and I were a lot younger, we didn't even know who the director or the writers were outside of whatever, Spielberg or Lucas.
Right.
But nowadays, like you said, that's the first question. Who's behind the creative process of this film? And I know you worked on all the big projects, from things like Black Panther to Shang-Chi and things like that. Is there anything that you're particularly proud of in the last few years that you feel like was a real success?
I think there's a lot, to be honest. I think my team, I want to give them kudos because they do an awesome work. I tell people we are on the front lines of making sure that we're navigating and telling our stories in a way that's going to resonate with our audiences. So, I mean, everything from when I first started working on Black Panther and being a part of that legacy, I think I was super thrilled about, to, you know, our team working on Narcos, to like when we worked on recently Turning Red, and we're having conversations with Disney and they don't know how well it's going to do, even though it's a Pixar film. And we're like, no, we got you. We know how to put, position this in a way that's not only going to reach the AAPI audience, but also the Hispanic, the multicultural, and African-American audiences. So I think there's a trust that we have with a lot of our clients, that they know that we are experts. We want the best for them. We want the best for our audience, as well as our media partners that support us in a lot of our campaigns that we work on. So I think we've done some great work. I just don't want to kind of pinpoint just one or two, because I think all of the campaigns that we've worked on have, for the most part, been super successful. And of course, with any campaign, there's key learnings, but overall, the work that we do and the movement that we're creating as far as the multicultural audience and understanding our power and voice and that representation is key. Kudos to everything that we do, because we're pushing our stories, we're pushing our narrative forward, and that's important.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And kudos to you and your team. I mean, you definitely deserve a lot of the respect in terms of the work. And I think too many people probably don't really understand. Like, they just think like, oh, posters or trailers, like that's what they really understand about the work, when it's so much more involved. You talked about something like Turning Red and like the multicultural approach, because it can't just be Asian Americans who like a movie like Turning Red. There's not enough of us, right? It can't just be one community. So when you take in a project like that and you tell a city like, okay, look, we're going to craft something that does appeal to multiple communities. How do you internally like brainstorm how to make that a truly multicultural approach?
I think it's a lot of times after we screen, what we typically do as a team is we look at the through lines, cultural moments. Like for Turning Red, there was a big boy band scene, and I think that resonates across the multicultural audiences. Family, food, mothers being overbearing and wanting the best for their kids. All of that translates across communities. And so I think those were the things that, when we were taking in consideration the strategy that we were going to put together for Disney Plus, is that those are things that I think we're going to lean into. We're going to find those right, for example, subsets, whether it be Black and Asian American mixed content creators that we can engage, that can be appealing to the African American, but also the AAPI audience. So we were looking at every nuance and theme and opportunities that we thought would really resonate and move the needle based off of the budgets that we were presented for the campaign.
And I think it was a huge success. And your perspective is absolutely right, Lane. People don't realize, like, some of the biggest anime fans I know are from the Black community, and some of the biggest K-pop fans I know are, Latinx and things like that. So I think your approach is absolutely dead on. What's your, in the last couple of questions, what's your advice for someone who is in your shoes, way back before you worked for Jon B, like coming out of college and wanting to get in the industry? What would be the advice you would share for someone like that?
I think the biggest thing is, I would say, just intern, because I majored in broadcast journalism, and I said, I'm going to be a news reporter. I'm going to be an anchor. And I interned, and I said, I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. And that's how I fell in love with like music. And then that's when I, end up getting an internship at BET. So I think internships are key in understanding what is that thing that you're going to be passionate about. And then just researching it. I think the key thing is like, plot out what you want to do. Like, do you want to be a director? Do you want to be a writer? Do you want to be an actor? Do you want to be a journalist? I think understanding the players and just understanding what it takes to be great in that. Because my thing is, it's like, for us as a team, it's like excellence is key. It's like, we can't be mediocre. We have to be excellent. And that's across the whole multicultural team. It's like, I don't want anything that's just mediocre, that's just going to be like, oh, that was great. Like, we're just, sorry to say it, but half-assing things. No, you have to understand what you're doing and strive for excellence. So I think I guess the advice that I would give someone is understand your space, whether it be journalism, directing, writing, acting, and plotting out a vision board or a plan that's going to get you to that in 1 year, 2 years. Setting goals and milestones, I think, will be helpful, and just pushing forward and surrounding yourself with people that can kind of push you into your destiny and what you intend to do as far as your career is concerned, I think is also important. So that would be my advice.
Well, that's great advice. I appreciate it, Marcus. I appreciate all the work that you and your team are doing. And, it's been great on a personal level, just working with your team. And, And I think you're doing really important stuff. So thank you for the time, and I hope we can chat again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much.